Today, let's dive into a simple but really profound idea through a story we're calling The Garden of the Heart. It's all about how the world we see out there is so often just a reflection of what's going on inside us.
So, let's meet Veda. For Veda, the world wasn't this beautiful thing to be admired. Nope. To her, it was like one giant broken-down puzzle. Every single thing, the mountains, the clouds, the rivers, it all just seemed wrong, like a mistake in some grand design that she, and only she, was meant to fix.
You see, Veda saw a broken world, and she saw herself as the very clever girl who was going to fix it. She was armed with blueprints, a real sense of mission, and she was ready to completely re-engineer creation itself.
So what was on her grand to-do list? Well, for starters, the mountains were way too pointy. The clouds, a total chaotic mess. And the wind? Oh, the wind was just an unruly roar that she believed desperately needed to be tamed. And this is really the key to understanding her. Veda's cleverness wasn't about trying to understand the world as it was about forcing it to submit to her designs. She was convinced that every single problem had a solution, and that solution was always going to be one of her brilliant inventions. But what happens when you try to force the entire world to fit into your personal blueprint? Well, as Veda was about to find out, the world has a funny way of pushing back. Her cleverness was about to meet its match. Her first big target was the wind. The plan seemed simple enough, at least in her head. She sewed these enormous, colorful blankets, climbed the absolute tallest trees she could find, and draped the blankets over all the branches. She was so sure she could just muffle the world into a nice, peaceful silence. A clever plan, maybe, but nature had other ideas. Veda's attempt to control the wind didn't just fail, it backfired spectacularly. It set off this whole chain reaction of problems that she never, ever saw coming. And here is where it all went so wrong. The blankets got soaked with rain and became incredibly heavy, snapping tree branches and casting this damp, gloomy shadow over the whole village. The baker couldn't get his bread to rise, and the villagers, the very people she thought she was helping, were now even grumpier than before. Her grand solution was, well, a grand failure. So you can just imagine her, completely defeated, sitting by the river, surrounded by the wreckage of her ambitions. And her plan to silence the wind was just one of many failures. She tried to build a wall to contain the river. She even tried to paint the stones a happier shade of yellow. And now, all she had to show for it was a world that felt even more broken than when she started. But it was right here, at her absolute lowest point, that something started to shift. A chance encounter by the river was about to give Veda a completely new perspective, one she never could have dreamed up in her blueprints. In her despair, a question just kind of escaped her lips, a whisper on the wind she'd tried so hard to silence. Why won't the world just change? It was this cry of frustration, a plea for an answer she couldn't find in any of her plans. And that's when a gentle voice kind of cut through her thoughts. It was an old man named Silas. And the contrast between the two of them was just striking. You had Veda, surrounded by the chaos of her broken inventions, and then there was Silas just sitting there peacefully, watching a dragonfly. He wasn't carrying any blueprints. All he had was a sense of calm.
Veda poured out all her frustrations, and Silas listened patiently. Then he responded with this one profound sentence. He said, "Yesterday, I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, so I am changing myself." Wow. In that one moment, the whole path from just being clever to actually being wise was laid out right in front of her. Silas didn't offer her any new plans, no grand solutions. Nope. Instead, he just motioned for her to come over to a still little pool of water at the river's edge. He invited her to look, not at the world, but at her own reflection. And what did she see in that reflection? Not the clever girl she always thought she was. She saw a face that was just pinched with anger and frustration. She saw eyes that were always searching for flaws, and a mouth set in this hard, stubborn line. For the first time, she wasn't looking at a broken world. She was looking at a broken spirit. And that, right there, was the turning point. The world didn't actually change. The mountains were still jagged, the winds still blew. The thing that changed was Veda. Her entire perception of the world was about to be remade from the inside out. This slide just illustrates that shift so perfectly. Before,
The wind was a roar that needed to be silenced. The river was an obstacle that had to be contained. But now, the wind was a song, and the river was simply being a river. That was its nature.
And here's the big revelation she had. It was her own anger that made the wind seem like a roar. It was her own impatience that made the river feel like an obstacle. Her inner world was the lens she was looking through, and that lens was coloring everything she saw.
This brand new understanding, it sparked a real change in her. The very next morning, for the first time in as long as she could remember, Veda didn't reach for her blueprints. A whole chapter of her life had just closed.
Her entire approach to life flipped. It was no longer about control, but about connection. Instead of trying to force her will on the world, she just began to participate in it, to connect with the people and the nature all around her.
So, what did this new way of being actually look like? Well, she helped her neighbor replant a garden that one of her inventions had actually destroyed. But this time there were no blueprints, no grand designs. There was just the feeling of the warm sun on her back, the soil in her hands, and the simple joy of connecting with someone.
Just imagine that for a second. Veda, in a garden, with no desire to redesign the flowers, no urge to improve on them in any way. She was just there, present, appreciating them for exactly what they were.
And that is really the heart of it all, isn't it? The world hadn't changed one bit, but Veda had. By tending to the garden of her own heart, she had completely transformed her experience of the world around her.
And so, this story leaves us with a question for our own lives. What might happen if we stopped trying so hard to fix the world around us, and instead just turned our attention to tending the garden of our own